I'm going to start off with a story from junior high because how many of you loved your junior high experience? Not high school, junior high. A few of you. What about the rest of you? So I'll share this with you. There's a lot. You guys are active this morning. I really love that. I love preaching to a highly caffeinated room. Makes things more excited. So I want to share with you about an experience I had in junior high. I was living in Germany. My dad was stationed there with the military. I was in this junior high class. We had a phenomenal PE teacher. And the PE teacher would do themes. And so the theme would change every couple of months. And we went into a couple of months where we were doing gymnastics. And so we were doing gymnastics, launching off the board and kind of jumping over stuff and doing the beam. And she made everybody do it no matter where you landed. And so at the end of these 2 months, we had this giant mat that took up half of the gymnasium. And what you had to do for your final exam in gymnastics is you had to go stand in the corner with your feet like this, put your hands up in the air to signify you're ready to start your routine. And so you can imagine this, a bunch of junior hires sitting on the edge of the mat watching people do routines. Boy, was that fun. When my best friend did his routine, I just remember making fun of him and laughing to no end and mocking him. Junior high boys are not always the kindest. I'm just letting you know. You may not know that. They're not always the wisest or the kindest. Well, it came turn for me to do my really, really impressive gymnastics routine. Boy, howdy, was I going to blow their socks off. That's not true. Anyway, so I get up there in the corner and I get ready for my final. I'm a little nervous. I can see all my buddies ready just to mock me incessantly. They're ready to make fun of my good when I'm in my sweatpants and my t-shirt. And I get ready to go do my routine and I put my hands up in the air. And a good friend of mine decided this would be a great time to come up behind me and pants me. For those of you who are young and don't know what being pantsed means, well, let me explain the joy of being pantsed. It's when someone grabs your sweatpants, pulls them down, and you're there in your skivvies and your underoos are showing, okay? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, a split second happens and I'm like, I'm in my underoos. I'm not really wearing underoos, but that's, I'm just saying underwear. And I'm going, oh my gosh, and I immediately pull them back up. My buddy is laughing. And this is the 80s, so no one really got in trouble for that. You know how we rolled back then. I'm sure he was talked to, but there was no real discipline. But there was really 2 words to kind of characterize exactly what happened in that moment, to define it perfectly, and that is this: embarrassing and awkward. Super duper awkward, man. I mean, if I go back and think about that, I'm like, and that kind of characterizes my experience in junior high overall. You know what I'm saying? You remember, do you guys miss those junior high years? Embarrassing and awkward, right? And I'll never forget about that. But the thing is I bet if we went around this room and said, listen, that's my story of a time where I was so embarrassed and it was so awkward. I mean, just my group of friends that I had, just so you'll know the character they had, all 6 of them sitting there, rolled out laughing on the floor. Like for them, that was the best thing that could have ever happened. At my expense, right? You gotta love friends like that. But has it ever happened to you? Have you, not being pantsed, hopefully not, but has it ever been in a situation where socially you get into something and you're just so embarrassed? Something happens. You know, maybe you're speaking to a room of people and you're like, man, I nailed that. And you realize your fly was open the whole time. Like that's your nightmare, right? Like we've all been in those situations where you're like, that is the most embarrassing thing, the most awkward thing that could have happened to me. What you may not know is there is a story in Scripture that is characterized by those 2 words. You may have heard this story before. You may have read it multiple times. You may have never put this story in the context of it being embarrassing, but definitely being awkward. But I want to take you to that story today. We're in our last week, the 9th week of our series we've been in entitled The Red Letters. For those of you who don't know, maybe you're visiting, it's called The Red Letters because in many different Bible translations, the words of Jesus are in red ink. So we've been looking at the parables of Jesus, some of the short teachings of Jesus. And today what I want to do is I want to take us to the Gospel of Luke in the 7th chapter to take you to a pretty well-known story if you're familiar with it. And what had happened is Jesus had been invited over to someone's house for a dinner, and then something really awkward and something really embarrassing happens. And now I looked at multiple translations this week. I typically preach out of the NIV. I will use the ESV at times, but this week I decided to use the New Living Translation. I really like the way they translated a few things. So I'm gonna read a couple of verses for you. In this story, remember the words, embarrassing and awkward. Jesus has been invited into a circumstance. Here we go, verse 36, Luke, chapter 7. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. When a certain immoral woman from that city heard that he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt down behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair, and then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. So Jesus, let me rewind, had been invited to a home of a very prominent Pharisee. Now, the Pharisees were really the dominant, the most well-known religious leaders of the day. They held the law to high regard. They kept all the right rules, and they were held in very high social standing. They were very high regarded. And I think we know in the Gospels, oftentimes Jesus had conflict with the Pharisees, but here's an instance where Jesus was actually invited into someone's home who was a Pharisee. What we do know at this point, Jesus' ministry, he probably had become somewhat like a local celebrity. His name was getting out. People were getting to know him. He could do miracles. People were wanting to be around him. So we don't know really the motive behind this Pharisee. By the way, this Pharisee's name is Simon. Simon the Pharisee invited him into his home, but there could have been different motives to that. Maybe he wanted to get to know who Jesus was more, or maybe, just maybe, the fact that he invited this local celebrity over kind of provided for him to have some social clout. I mean, imagine if you were able to invite an A-list actor over to your home and then you said, hey, we're having an open house, and a bunch of people come over and they're like, oh my gosh, Brad Pitt's at the Goodwins house. You guys would be like, the Goodwins must be kind of a big deal because Brad Pitt's hanging out there. I don't love Brad Pitt, by the way. Only actor I can think of who is A-list. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. Don't judgment. So we don't know the motive here. Again, we're speculating of why Jesus was invited to this Pharisee's home, but it could have been because maybe it provided some social clout for Simon himself. But this wasn't uncommon. It wasn't uncommon to invite a guest who was well-known over to this situation, to have an open house, to allow people to come in. It was very common in that time, in that culture, so that's what we see. But here in this scene, so again, the Pharisees are there. Probably some prominent people from the town are there. Jesus is sitting down, and back in that day when you were at the table, you were reclined on a bench. You would lean on your elbow and you would eat with one hand, which would allow his feet to be dangling off the back end there. Hence how this lady had access to his feet. So there's this situation. He's the guest of honor. Probably some important people from this town are there. Everybody's sitting there. And all of a sudden, the room gets tense. It shifts. This lady, which they say an immoral woman, comes in. Now, she has a reputation. She comes in to this party. Now, I don't know about you, when you're invited to someone's house to hang out, typically I bring a loaf of bread or a key lime pie. She brought a big jar of perfume. It's a little awkward, isn't it? You look up and all of a sudden, hey, that lady who we all know is coming in here, and she's carrying a heavy jar of perfume. And she walks in. Now, you got to just mentally picture this with me. We read this Bible story and we kind of spiritualize it and gloss over it. All of a sudden, the social equity of that room just changed. It gets awkward. It gets a little intense. Why is she here? And then she proceeds to kind of do something, right? He's reclining at the table. His feet are hanging off the end. And now this woman starts to pour perfume all over his feet. Oh, by the way, if that's not enough, the fact that you just came in kind of uninvited and you're dosing out large doses of perfume. Imagine if you went to a party with some like drag whore and you're just walking around going, praise the Lord, praise the Lord, praise the Lord, and spraying it around. That's weird. So the fragrance starts to fill up the room. If you were ignoring it, you're not ignoring it now because this fragrance is overwhelming. She's pouring it on Jesus' feet as she's weeping. She's crying, pouring perfume out, and now she has this idea, okay, I got perfume and I got tears on his feet. Maybe I should use my hair as a towel. Now, I know that was 2,000 years ago, but I'm pretty sure that's probably just as strange as it would be now, right? This is an awkward environment. I mean, you can just imagine, like, they're thinking, why is she even here? And now she's doing this dramatic behavior, and it's super, super awkward. Just get the mental picture. Now, I know a lot of us who have heard this story taught through, what we've been taught is this is an extravagant act of worship to the Lord, a thing of beauty that she did. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I want you to do is stand back and humanize the story for a second. In that moment, they're not thinking, oh my gosh, this lady is having an extravagant act of beautiful worship to Jesus. No, they're thinking, why is she here? She shouldn't be here. And oh my gosh, she's ugly crying. Tears are falling on his feet. She's wiping him with her hair. We are so embarrassed. Look at how our guest of honor is being treated. This is the most, what is he gonna think of our town? This is the craziest thing that could happen. Why did this lady show up? But I find interesting is this. That lady, this immoral woman, she made a pretty bold decision. She's not stupid. She knows that entering the doors into that room is gonna cost her. It's gonna cost social standing, which she may not have much in the first place. It's gonna cost her social equity. She knows she's walking into a room about to be judged up and down. She took a risk, but she is compelled. Something inside of her, even in her extreme, vulnerable social condition, something inside of her is compelling her to get close to Jesus. Something is compelling her to get into closer proximity to this one they call Jesus. But the room is awkward. I'm sure the hosts are embarrassed. The room is tense. I can imagine the tension is just rising. And the Pharisees, man, they have some thoughts about what's going on. Simon is definitely viewing this situation a certain way. Jump in with me at verse 39. When the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner. Then Jesus answered her thoughts. Simon, he said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. Go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. So again, let me point this out. We know from this story, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this woman's reputation clearly precedes her. There's an implication also that maybe the Pharisees were trying to figure out, who's this Jesus guy? We hear that he's doing miracles, but who is he? Is he a prophet? Is he an Old Testament prophet that's here? Is he a prophet? And Simon is probably analyzing Jesus and trying to figure out, okay, we don't know who this guy is, but is he a prophet? But here's what happens. In his mind, without verbalizing it out loud, he starts to think to himself, oh, surely he's not a prophet. We may have thought he was. Maybe that was some of the backroom discussions with the religious leaders. Who is this Jesus? Is he a prophet? But now Simon's thinking, well, I've reached my conclusion. Obviously, Jesus is not a prophet. If he was a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is crying all over his feet and pouring perfume and wiping his feet with his hair. He would know what's happening in this room. See, in Simon's religious mindset, the righteous people of the day avoided sinners like the plague. See, Simon was clean, And this lady, with her reputation and how the town viewed her, by the way, historically, we don't know for a fact, historically it's thought that she was more than likely a prostitute. We don't know that for sure, but the story and the context kind of fits into that scenario. So everybody knows that this woman, she's immoral, she's unclean, and Simon is thinking, oh my gosh, if this man were a prophet, if he was righteous, if he was clean, he would know what type of person is touching her right now. Here's what I find ironic. As I read through this passage over and over again, here's kind of funny. Here's some food for thought that I find kind of humorous. Simon is literally having this thought. If this man were a prophet, he would know. But what does it say there? He said to himself, meaning he didn't say this out loud. He's sitting there thinking it. And what does Jesus do? Jesus literally reads his mind just like a prophet would. Jesus literally reads his mind and says, it says there in verse 40, Jesus answered his thoughts. He says, I have something to say to you. And Simon says, well, go ahead, teacher. And here's where Jesus goes into a really, really short parable. Again, a parable is a story that we can relate to, that what God does is he embeds spiritual truths within them that we can glean from something that's practical. And here's what Jesus does. What we don't know as the story folds on is Jesus is actually setting Simon up. And this is the first step of the setup. So watch as Jesus sets Simon up. It's actually pretty humorous in one sense. So let's read this story that Jesus tells him in verse 41 through verse 43. Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other. But neither of them could repay him. So he kindly, pay attention to that word, kindly. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Then he asked a question. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? So Simon's put on the spot. Simon gives his answer. Well, I suppose the one whom he canceled the larger debt. That's right, Jesus said. That's an interesting exchange. Jesus tells a pretty straightforward story. We have two people. One owes 500 pieces of silver. The other owes 50. So let me give you the context for the value of what we're talking about. One piece of silver in that day was about the equivalent to 1 day's wages of work. So if you kind of do quick math, and I'm going to kind of skirt around a little bit, one person owed a little bit over a year and a half's worth of wages, and one person owed around 2 months' worth of wages. So both of those amounts are not insignificant, right? You have one that's near 2 months and one that's near over a year and a half. That's still some significant sum. But here's the thing. The one that owed this much, 50 pieces, and the one owed 500, they were in the exact same boat. You know, when you don't have any money, you don't have any money. If you can't pay $10 back and you have nothing, you can't pay $10 back. If you owe them $100,000 and you have no money, you can't pay $100,000 back. So it doesn't matter that they had 550 in the one sense. It doesn't matter because they both had no money to repay their debt. They're both sunk, both in the same situation. They both are kindly treated, and their debts are canceled, wiped out, forgiven. Yay, what a great day. How many of you would want your debts forgiven and canceled like your financial ones? That'd be a good day, right? You get a letter in the mail and be like, oh man, my bank company who I have my car note from came in and they just said, hey, we love you. We had a great day. We realized we made too much money this year. We're forgiving your car loan. You can pray for that. I don't know if it'll happen, but that would be amazing. I don't think banks are into the business of doing that. But they couldn't pay their debt. So their debt is kindly forgiven. It's a good part of the story, by the way. It's good news. Now, here's what's interesting. Again, as I told you, Jesus is totally setting Simon up. He's now cast, he's got the hook with the answer, and he starts to reel it in. And there's a key word in the response that I want you to see. So when Jesus says this, he forgave them and he canceled their debts. And he asked this, who do you suppose loved him more? That word love is a key word to hone in on. He could have said, who do you suppose was more grateful? Who do you suppose was more relieved? Who do you suppose was really happy? But he doesn't use those words. He says, who do you suppose loved him more? Love in this walk with Jesus, love in our faith, in our Christian faith, is the foundation. For God so loved the world that he gave us Jesus, his one and only Son, to come and die for us. The greatest commandments are what? To love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, to love your neighbor as yourself. Love is the foundation of our faith, so it's a really big deal when Jesus brings up this word. For us, love should be on the forefront of our faith. And so Jesus asked this question, who do you suppose is loving more? And here's the good news. Simon answers correctly. Good job, Simon. You answered correctly. I suppose the one that owed the 500 pieces of silver. Suppose the one with the larger debt is probably going to love them more because they were really in a bad situation, couple of years behind. See, Jesus right here, what he's doing in this parable, he's teaching a spiritual truth. That spiritual truth is just as relevant for each and every one of us listening here this morning. Listen to this. To the extent you understand your need for Jesus' mercy, grace, and forgiveness is the extent you will love him when he freely gives you those things. I get feedback often about my preaching, and you know I'm pretty vulnerable with all my faults and shortcomings and my past and addiction, and I mention it often, but you know why? I'm not proud of it, but you know what beautiful thing came out of it? When you've been absolutely broken and you've seen the depravity of yourself apart from God. In that place, if you encounter Jesus and you give your life to him, there's something of beauty out of it. Listen, I want to frame this clearly. I don't want my kids to go into gross sin like I experienced. Let me be clear. It bothers me when Christians are like, well, I don't really have a testimony because I never really sinned a whole lot. Thank you. Praise Jesus. That's what God wants. That's a great thing. I celebrate that with you. I don't want my kids to have my stories. I want my kids to live a pretty clean, God-glorifying life. It's not a bad thing if you haven't been involved in gross sin. Here's the thing, no matter where you've been, whether you know you're a mess and a wreck apart from the grace of God, or whether you've lived a pretty moral life, we're all on the same playing field. Each and every one of us have a debt that cannot be paid. Whether you owe 50 pieces of silver or 500, and sometimes I've met people that they know they have a 500 piece of silver debt, and when they've gotten to that point and they've encountered Jesus in that place, the response of love is overwhelming. Do you realize that your walk with Jesus is not meant to be characterized as a list of rules and regulations? Your walk with the Lord is meant to come out of a heart compelled by love. And that's the reason we follow him. So Jesus is trying to share this with the Pharisees, and clearly Simon is thinking, I have no debt to be owed. I have no debt. I'm clean. I'm good. My account is fine. But clearly this woman who's pouring perfume, filling up the room with this smell, weeping profusely, wiping the tears off Jesus' feet with his hair, causing a scene. Clearly she knows she's a 500 piece of silver sinner. Man, I bet you can cut the tension with a knife. What happens next? Let's look at verse 44. Jesus turns to the woman and he said, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss. From the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. See, up until this point, there's just tension. Why is this woman here? What in the world is she doing? This is inappropriate. She's weeping, causing a scene, making the room smell like perfume. I have a perfume allergy. I'm going to go outside. I'm so offended right now. No one wants to see her. No one wants to see that. Seriously. You don't want to see that at your party. It's a problem. Simon is hosting at his house, and you know what he has? He has a problem. This woman is a problem. This woman's a problem. But not Jesus. He's not thinking that. Jesus doesn't see a problem. He sees a woman. And you know what he does? He takes this awkward social situation and he turns everyone's attention towards her. He says, hey, Simon, look at this woman right here. So if you were trying to ignore the situation and uncomfortable with it, too late. Jesus, the guest of honor, just said, hey, everyone, look at this woman right here. This woman kneeling right here. Like, Simon, listen, since the time I came in, she hasn't stopped kissing my feet. You didn't greet me with a kiss, which is like the first century equivalent of a handshake, and no, we're not bringing that back at Emmanuel, just want to make sure you know that. You didn't anoint my head with oil as a sign of honor, but she's pouring out this expensive perfume. Oh yeah, but how did she get it? Through her prostituting acts? You're no prophet. She's cleaning my feet. You didn't offer to get the dust off my feet, which is customary. Simon, are you thinking that maybe you're just glad that you invited me over and I, Jesus, should be privileged to be in your presence? You're a Pharisee, by the way. So I wonder if Simon wasn't just like, Jesus should be grateful he's allowed in my home because I'm an important person. He didn't show him the customary honor of the day. But this woman, since the time she showed up, has not stopped acting in honor and love towards Jesus. Again, at great cost to her. Apart from what everybody thought of her, she's compelled. And she's weeping and cleaning his feet with her hair and her tears and pouring out this perfume as an act of honor to Jesus. She has come in. But yeah, we know she's an immoral woman. And you know what? Everybody in the room is just saying she's an immoral woman. But Jesus flips the script on Simon. This is great. Not only does he point her out and kind of magnify her presence, he flips on him and says, but since I came in, you didn't do A, B, C, or D. Now, what do you think happened to the social tension in the room when Jesus said that? It just keeps getting more uncomfortable, more awkward, and more embarrassing. Like at this point, we're like, oh my gosh, we were embarrassed. This lady showed up and she's acting like that. Now Jesus is talking to Simon. Oh, Jesus is rebuking Simon and saying to everybody, Simon, you've been a really bad host. I don't think any of this is really socially acceptable. But see, Jesus, he saw something in this woman. Everybody else had labeled her an immoral woman, this prostitute more than likely. But Jesus saw a human being made in the image of God. He saw this woman who, at great risk to her own reputation, did whatever it took to get in close proximity to Jesus. Simon, you don't see this woman, you see a problem. But I see a woman who is desperate to be near me, and all she's doing is worshiping and honoring me since the time she showed up. Shows the nature of Jesus. Guess what? There's some good news for you today. Jesus sees you as a person, not a problem. Jesus sees you as a person and not a problem. See, here's what happens in the world and society, especially in our cancel culture age. We love to cancel people now, right? And society and the world will define you by the worst thing you've done and the worst day you've had. It will just slap a label on you. Here's who you are. It will define you by the worst thing. It will say, here's your identity. Your identity is you are this. You can drive by now, and I see it all the time. I can't stand fentanyl. We need to be praying against the fentanyl epidemic that's hitting our cities and nations right now. Like, I drive up Alvernon every day. It's breaking my heart to see the effects of fentanyl in our community right now. And man, I'm telling you what, I drive along sometimes and you see some jacked up things, some people that are obviously heavily under the influence of fentanyl. They can't look up, they're bent over down. And just one way you can look at them and go, oh my gosh, another homeless drug addict in our city. What a problem. How does Jesus see them? Jesus knows their story. Jesus knows who their mom and dad is. Jesus knows what drove them to addiction. I'm not saying there's no personal accountability. I'm just saying Jesus sees each and every person as a human being, created in his image. For that reason alone, you are of immense worth in his eyes. But yet we love to define people. There's another homeless drug addict. Or maybe you know something that their behavior is just really crazy and you're just like, that person's whacked. That person's crazy. You ever said that about someone? Raise your hand if I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make you raise your hand. You're going to come up and get prayer afterwards. That's funny. But we do that. You know someone who's severely deceived, who you look at and you go, they have a very distorted worldview. They're whacked out, right? You can just label them. They're completely whacked. We love to label people by the worst thing about them. But see, here's what I love about God. Man, I'm so grateful for this. God doesn't define you from your worst day or the worst thing you've ever done. That's why Jesus came, to deal with the worst day you ever had, to deal with the worst thing you've ever done. Yeah, that skeleton in the closet, he came to deal with that thing. Some of us have skeletons in the closet. I used to. They're out now, and they're gone. You know why? The blood of Jesus Christ is greater than anything else. This lady's honoring Jesus. She's looking for forgiveness, you guys. Why did she come into that room? She wasn't sitting there like some of us are going, well, I got it together, I don't have it together, I kind of like Jesus, but I'm not going to stop surfing porn at night, or I kind of like Jesus, but I'm not going to stop gossiping about my friends, or I kind of like Jesus, but I'm not really going to go full in, I'm going to get drunk on the weekends. Listen, I've done that stuff, guys. She wasn't there trying to debate this thing. She knew, I am done. I am broken. My life is finished. I am messed up, man. I am the 1,000-piece of silver woman. I cannot pay this debt. But who is this Jesus? I got to get near to Jesus. Oh, and Jesus just keeps on going in, man. Now he's got Simon, and he's just... That's how you catch a fish. I'm not really a fisherman, but that's what I've seen on TV shows. You go, and then you let him go, and then you go, so here we go. Jesus is doing another, one more time. He's going to pull Simon in for the closer, man. The closer's coming. Listen. He says this, verse 47, I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven, so she has shown me much love. There's that word love again. Simon, I don't know who you think you are, but this immoral woman has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only a little love. Obviously, she knew her debt was great, compelled to go seek out Jesus. Then here's where Jesus really just messes up the entire room. If you understand this next verse, you will understand what he's about to say is one of the most inappropriate things you could say in that day and age. He's about to offend everyone. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. Okay, let me just pause there. You know what they're thinking as soon as he says that? They have one word on their mind, blasphemy. Blasphemy. Who does this guy think he is to forgive sins? Only God can forgive sins. Huge miscalculation, right? Here they are judging Jesus. There's no way he can be a prophet. They had no idea that God, wrapped in human flesh, was in their presence. And when this woman came in, compelled by love, she was worshiping God. So he exercises divine authority, forgives her sins. Then the men at the table said among themselves, now they're talking out loud amongst themselves. You can immediately feel them shocked and offended. This guy's a blasphemer. And they're like, hey, Simon reaches over to his friend. Did you just hear what he said? Who does this man think he is? You could read that different ways. You could read that, who does this man that he goes around forgiving sins? You could read it like that, like they're impressed. They're not impressed. That is not an expression of them. Who is this man? We are fast. No, they are greatly offended. Who is this man think he is? Forgiving sins? Blasphemy. Then Jesus goes in for the closer, said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. She had a sliver of faith. Why would she put herself in that social situation? She was compelled by love. I want to back up for something because this story clearly demonstrates the generous nature of God. This story clearly demonstrates the mercy, the forgiveness, the favor, the goodness, the love of Christ. I mean, you can't get away from that in this story, but I also want to point something else out. And there's a reason I'm going to point it out. We live in a day and age where people are rebranding and repackaging Jesus so he's so user-friendly you don't have to change. Jesus accepts you just as you are, so therefore you can do whatever you want. That is deception and a falsehood. The world is telling you right now, just you are who you are. If you feel a certain way, that's who you are. That's your identity. The world is selling that wholesale. They're discipling our culture. They're discipling our kids oftentimes better than we are as a church. But listen to this. The reason I'm saying this is Jesus, he doesn't ignore her sin. He sees her as a woman. He forgives her sin. He sees her faith. But listen to what he says. He tells the whole room what they already knew. He points out the elephant in the room. He gets the elephant in the room and says, come here front and center. Now listen to what he says to everybody listening. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. See, here's the thing I love about Jesus. Man, his grace is better than you can ever think. His love for you is so infinitely more than you could ever imagine, ask, or think. The love he has for you right now, exactly where you're at, would just blow your mind if you fully understood it. The mercy and the character of God towards us as broken people is better than we can ever imagine. But even as much as those statements are true, Jesus doesn't wink at our sin. He doesn't sit there and go, wink, wink, no big deal. It's a big deal. You know why it's a big deal? Because he loves you so much. He wants to set you free from yourself. He knows sin is like getting it, and you know what? Maybe you're even getting away with it. But you know what getting away with it is? For years, I was going to church. I was playing drums totally stoned on Sunday morning. You can judge me if you want. It happened. Jesus loves me now. I was messed up going to church, and I was getting away with it. No one knew. You know what it was like? It was like me going home in secret and drinking poison in the back bedroom, and no one knew, but I'm getting poison from the inside out because that is the result of sin. Sin leads to death, and Jesus wants to set you free from sin and death. He wants to bring you into his grace, forgiveness, and mercy. So I love that part of the story because Jesus is like, I'm going to put it all on the table. We're going to point everything out. This woman's got issues. I tell you, her sins are many, but she loves much. See, this story is relevant for us right now. Oftentimes in the church, we have three types of people. We have the religious Pharisees. We have sinners who run from God. And we have sinners who run towards God. I'm telling you what category you want to land in? Man, you want to be a sinner who runs towards God. There's a meme that's gone around on the internet the last couple years, and I love it. I'll paraphrase it because I couldn't find it, but it basically says this. Religion says this: I've messed up. My Father's going to kill me. But the gospel says this: I've messed up. I need to go find my Father. And that's the beauty of the gospel. See, when you begin to realize how broken you are in your sin, you don't have to stay stuck, because Jesus offers an invitation. See, a proper view of our sin and our broken life and our need for God should drive us towards Jesus because of his love for us. Did you catch that? Put that slide up if you could. A proper view of our sin and our broken life and our need for God should drive us towards Jesus because of his love for us. Religion says you can't come to Jesus until you're cleaned up. The gospel says, come as you are. He already knows how jacked up you are. He already knows how broken you are. I want to invite the band back up. What I see oftentimes for those who are Christians that are holding on to sin, and listen, when I say that, I don't think there's anybody in this room who's arrived. I don't think there's anybody who will raise their hand and just say, yeah, I've reached complete sanctification. I'm 100% Christ-like. I never mess up. Because if you do that and you're married, I'm going to immediately go talk to your spouse and figure out that's definitely not true. It ain't true. So we're all on the same page. You all have a debt. You all have sin. But here's the thing. Are you treating that sin like a pet? Are you nursing it? Are you holding on to it? Because you're like, Jesus is all right, but I want this also. Because Jesus' motivation for you is he wants to set you free because of his love for you. He wants you to experience the fullness of life that he offers for you. And listen, there's a beautiful thing that happened with this woman, this broken prostitute who brought her jar of perfume and her tears and her weeping and forced her way into this room, not caring about what anybody thinks. She was desperate for Jesus. And sometimes when we've been in church for a long time, you know what your problem is? You're complacent and you're no longer desperate for Jesus. But listen, all of us need a fresh hunger and desperation for the person of Jesus Christ. It's not just the salvation experience. It's a coming again and again to his altar to find him in that place. Some of you need to get desperate for Jesus again. So as I finish today, I want to invite you to something. Last night, I didn't have a closing to the sermon. I was trying to figure out what's the application, how do we respond to this word? And as clear as day, around 6 p.m., I'm on the computer last night, as clear as day, I felt the Spirit of God saying, you do an altar call. Now here's the thing, you may go, I don't know if I want to go up to the altar, because if I do, people may be thinking, what kind of sin are they coming up for? Well, first of all, I can tell you, it's not really the kind of church we have. We have a pretty loving church. Second thing is, we could all come up to the altar this morning. We all got something we're wrestling with. But we're going to sing a song called Come to the Altar. And here's what I want the response to be. If you're just simply, even you can come up if you're simply saying, I'm complacent and I need to get desperate for Jesus again. I don't have a proximity to him like I need to. I'll do whatever it takes to get in close proximity with him. If you don't yet know the Lord, I'm going to be up here, and I would love to tell you about Jesus and the beauty of the gospel. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray right now, invite you to stand. And as soon as we start this song, if God is calling you to come do business, just come right up here to the front, kneel down, whatever you need to do, and get with the Lord today. So Father, I'm asking God that all of us in this room would have a fresh understanding of the debt that we can't pay, but of the beauty of the Savior, of the person of Jesus, the beauty of the cross and how you paid for our sin, and the forgiveness you freely give, and the cleansing and the mercy and the newness of life. Lord, would we find new life at the altar today? Lift up each person right now who feels compelled to come up to do business with you, no matter what it is. Even if it's as simple as I need a fresh, desperate hunger for God, all the way to my life is broken and I need him. Everything in between, would you do a work with your presence in our midst this morning? In Jesus' name, amen.